Welcome everyone to Iowa AFER Conference, and what's your brand of planning? Avoid generic by being intentional with myself and Kyle. We're glad you could join us. I am Jaryd Prince. I'm from Clinton, Iowa. My Twitter handle you can see on the screen is at Jaryd J Prince Phys Ed. If you want to follow me, just hop on Twitter and do that. I'm also on the Iowa AFER board. I do a lot of committees for our organization. I try to be as involved as I can. I'll let Kyle introduce himself and we'll get started here.
Yeah, thanks, Jaryd. My name is Kyle Bragg. I teach K through 5 in Scottsdale, Arizona, and I'm also on the board for Arizona as an advocacy chair. Jaryd and I both really feel strongly about intentional planning, and we've been kind of talking on Twitter about it and trying to come up with an opportunity to present, and we found this one, and we're excited to present this. So here we go. Thanks for coming.
All right. So when we think of like basic or in general planning, it's just really easy to get caught up in day-to-day tasks and feel overwhelmed and not really think about how we are being intentional and how our students are learning on how we are teaching. So when you think basic, you think doing something the same every day. We hear that all the time. If it's not broke, don't fix it kind of thing. But when you're being basic, you're not allowing your students to learn at their fullest potential. So as teachers, we need to instill intentional teaching for our students to have the most success, to get the most out of their learning per day. And Kyle's going to fill us in on what intentional planning would look like and what it actually is.
I think intentional planning, as you can see this cycle here, there's lots of different parts and pieces. For example, you want to observe the students, what they can do, take a look at your assessments and what information can you take from that to inform future assessments or instruction, and then using that knowledge of students to create some intentional lesson plans that really meet the needs of each individual learner, and then implement those. So, as we know, each second grade class is not going to be able to do the same thing. So yes, I might have a second grade lesson plan, but I'll have lots of different notes on what this class is going to start with and what these students are going to start with based on what I know about them already as learners. So basically, intentional planning is to act purposefully, have a plan, and knowing how to accomplish it. It really extends the children's thinking, and it provides meaningful and relevant experiences for them that they're more likely to remember. So as the teacher, what are you doing and why are you doing it? I remember going through the national board process, and that's basically what they had you think about all the time. What are you doing and why are you doing it? How is it impacting students' learning? So before each class, I try to use my knowledge of students, like I talked about. What is each person capable of doing for that lesson, or at least what's the best guess? We're not always going to be perfect as far as knowing exactly what they can do, but we can at least plan for it with our knowledge of students that we have already. So look at your lesson plan, look at your routines, your strategies, your activities, your progressions, assessments, transitions, and ask yourself, why am I doing it this way? Do I have evidence this is working? Oftentimes I ask some teachers, why are they doing something this way? And they say they've just been doing it for 20 years and that's that. And I don't think that's a good enough reason to do something. I think it's really important to reflect on. We talk about students reflecting, how important that is, and it's important for us as teachers to reflect and make sure that our strategies and routines, they're actually effective based on the data you've collected. So each thing you do, how is it going to impact student learning? If you don't have an answer, like I said, to those questions, you might need to go back and adjust things to make them more relevant. Or if an administrator walks in and they ask you, why are you doing something, and you don't really have an answer, that's a sign that you might just need to reevaluate some things. So I'll give specific examples here at the bottom. So things I might be asking myself: how does this warm-up or activity fit into my lesson unit and yearly scope and sequence? So if it's a random Twitter game, it might not fit with my lesson plan for the day. It needs to be purposeful, meaningful. For example, if we're talking about the components of fitness, I might have a warm-up that they're demonstrating all of them and explaining to their partner why it's significant. If we're doing some rhythm stuff, it might be a dance to get warmed up. It doesn't have to directly relate to the grade level outcome, but I think it's beneficial to have it, or at least make it purposeful in some way to where students understand why they're doing it versus just a random game. It's okay to play games, but it has to connect somehow and it has to be relevant.
And Kyle, for those random Twitter games, like just mark them down, remember them, favorite them, like them, whatever you need to do, and see where they relate later.
Yeah, good point. Using that bookmark feature on Twitter is great, because you can store that or even save it to like Google Drive, for example, and then put it into a folder, so when you get to that unit, you can bring it out. So you can still do it, but make sure it's at the most appropriate time, I guess, as far as what your plan is for the year. Why did I pair students this way? I do a lot of random partners with an app called Class Dojo, which is free, but also Team Shake, I think, is like 99 cents. But why do I pair students that way? So people can learn from other different cultures, different experiences, make new friends, teaches directly how to be open-minded, so they're not always with the same person. So that's why I pair students that way. Why do I have this student demonstrate? I'll probably talk to that person ahead of time if we're doing jump rope. I know a certain student is pretty good at jump rope, but not just pretty good, also is humble. I like to reward people for being a good model as far as being nice and kind and humble. They're not trying to brag, so I'll pick them. I'll talk to them ahead of time, and if they're willing to do it, I'll do it, rather than just surprising them mid-lesson and say, hey, go show me this. And because that's not really creating an emotionally safe environment, right? You're actually catching them off guard. We want to make sure everyone feels comfortable in PE, both physically and emotionally. Why did I praise it the way I did? I usually praise based on the process rather than the product. Okay, so instead of saying, great job of hitting the ball over the fence, which is result oriented, and not everyone is capable of doing that based on maybe less experience or not as much power, I might say something like, I love the effort you're giving. And that's something that everyone is capable of doing, but that's something I intentionally plan for. That way, when I see something, I know how to praise them, or I know how to give feedback to them that is going to be most effective and gonna promote or encourage that inclusive environment where everyone feels valued, rather than focusing on the results. And then why to ask the questions and the reflections. We always talk about how important the reflection is. It gets them to connect. It gives them opportunities to connect what they learn to the real world. They can self-assess. They can provide cues to see what they remember for checks for understanding. But I think sometimes teachers rush through the reflection or skip it altogether because they want to play a game for an extra minute. I want to play as long as possible too. But if we don't reflect on why we're doing it, it's not that relevant. It's not that meaningful for students, and they're not going to quite understand that why as well. I'm really big on social emotional learning, and I'm going to show a brief little video of something you can do in tag games, or any game, but this is a tag game called Thankful Tag, that I'm embedding these SEL competencies within the tag game. So not only are they learning about tag and chasing and fleeing, they're also showing gratitude by being thankful.
I'm thankful for life and everything ever.
Aww.
I'm thankful for my friends. I'm thankful for my dad and my mom. I am thankful for food and water and family.
Nice.
So as you can see, that takes a little bit extra time planning, but it's so worth it, because all of a sudden they're connecting things to the real world. They're showing gratitude. The whole class is running much more smoothly because of that little extra time in advance. So instead of just playing a random tag game, you're playing a tag game that's meaningful to your philosophy. So for example, that really fits in well with me, but if it doesn't for you, think of something that is relevant for that you can kind of tie into your philosophy that will help encourage that connection or deeper thinking, or making it meaningful for our students. So I think having the what, why, how for lessons is really important. That way students understand what they're working towards. And I got this from Joey Fight, and these are the Shape America grade level outcomes. And I have those posted, so when they come in, students understand what exactly they're working on that day. And the why is my favorite. So they know what they're doing, but the why is really important because it shows that it's relevant. Okay, so why are we learning it? I know when I was a kid, I would always ask why. So I try to plan intentionally by proactively including the why. That way, students are more likely to put forth maximum effort because there's a reason behind it. And then how. So what, why, how. I think it sets the tone early as far as making sure it's very clear. I don't think it's fair to assess kids when they don't really know what they're working towards or don't know what the assessment is going to be. I think it's important to make sure they're comfortable and know what they're working towards. That way it's more of a valid assessment, I guess. So yeah, that what, why, how is, and I know Jaryd, you use that as well. I saw yours even on the virtual classroom. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, I use that as well. And I intentionally leave the why blank sometimes. So when students come in, especially my older ones, they see that that's blank. So then I can start asking open-ended questions about that would guide towards conversation of why it's important. So then they're writing as they're talking, as they're giving answers, I can write those down. So they are the ones coming up with the why and why our lesson's important.
That's a great way to empower students and make sure they're valued and heard. And yeah, that's awesome. Kind of put the ownership on them.
Absolutely.
Here is some examples of things I do that I'm intentionally planning for ahead of time. First of all, I always like to start basic, especially when it's a tough skill like jump rope. Start basic and get the students to increase their confidence early. That way they're not, they're less likely to give up or just to stop trying. As you can see in the circle right here, if you notice, there's no front and back. It's a circle. We're all connected. We're a team. That's something I plan for. That's something I want everyone to be together. I want everyone to see each other. That way we're more of a team environment versus the front and back. I use pretend equipment first. That way when they have the skill or they know what they're doing with their body before. So they are, it's almost like a level 1 type thing. So when they get the equipment, I already know that they're going to put their hands in the correct spot. Because sometimes if you give the equipment first, they're just going to start playing and hitting it randomly. But now you know they have the form because you saw it. And I'll say things like, hey, what do you guys notice that Alexandra and Owen are doing? And then they'll look at Alexandra and Owen, and then someone will say, oh, they both have their head up. And then we all say head up. And that shows a leadership opportunity. I basically praised them, but I also had the other students come up with things that they thought that they were doing, and then they all had them learn from those 2 models. So I thought that was another good way to have students learning from other students, but that's something you have to plan for. Like I said, it doesn't just happen. Demonstrate making a mistake. I think this is really important. I think it's good to show students that we are human beings as teachers and we're going to make mistakes, and that shows that mistakes are okay and we can learn from them, and that kind of frees them up to not worry so much about the results and just worry about the process and doing their very best. So it shows that we're all in this together and we're going to make mistakes, and that's okay, but he keeps on going though. So what do you do when it's tough? You keep on going. We'll talk about why our accepting challenge is good. Knowing that we have challenges coming up, right? So if we're doing jump rope and that's kind of new to these students, proactively we're discussing why challenges and accepting them are good, and they walk and talk with their partner, so they still get a little bit of movement, but now I'm listening to their feedback and they're talking about, well, challenges are good because if we always did things that were easy, we would never learn and grow, and things like that. And then you can actually remind them that later if they get frustrated, hey, didn't you say that challenges are good? And then they're like, oh yeah. On the very right, you'll see a couple modifications or progressions I have for jump rope, knowing that it's a tough skill. So before I even have them turn their own rope, as you can see, the partner is having they're turning the noodle over and just working on timing and the 2-foot jump. And then you'll see the mini noodle I have on the bottom helps the student track the noodle, and it helps it slow it down. It also helps the noodle or the jump rope stay wider, so there's a bigger room to jump through. It also makes it easier to see. So I think using that small jump rope or small noodle on the jump rope can also be effective. But all this ties into having a plan ahead of time that's intentional and purposeful, that's going to be relevant for the students and meaningful. And those are just kind of things that we can all kind of think about when we're doing activities and thinking ahead of time.
Kyle, these intentional planning you have here for progressions really leads into the growth mindset, and the ultimate goal for physical education is to have physically literate students at the end of it. But allowing these progressions, the walk and talks are terrific. That allows that growth mindset in students to develop, and I think that's awesome.
Yeah, and that's something that the teachers talk about as well, the classroom teachers. So we're connecting common language between physical education and classroom, so they're more likely to understand and connect PE to other subject areas. And then the other classroom teachers will hear you using these common terms that they use, and then all of a sudden they're going to be more likely to embed or be willing to embed physical education standards and grade level outcomes, or at least terms, because you're helping them. So in third grade, for example, I use the word adapt a lot because I know that's a really important vocab word. And I talk to the classroom teacher about they're learning about how animals adapt to their environment, and how can we adapt in physical education when we go outside and it's 110 degrees out there. How can we adapt how we do physical education when it's so hot? Walk and talk with a neighbor, go. And they'll talk about, well, we might need to pace ourselves, we stay hydrated, things like that. So kind of, if possible, try to intentionally plan some sort of common language or language from the classroom. I think
that's great.
Here are some. Earlier I talked about having a plan and having the grade level outcome or objective posted so they know what they're working towards. So I think this is really, really important to have the expectation ahead of time so they know what they're working towards. So I got this. This is from Tanner Rose, actually, fellow Iowa. Yeah. This is a second grade jump rope lesson. So this is the grade level outcome for second grade. Before we do this, though, at the beginning of the year and every day pretty much, we talk about the importance of being honest. And these clickers are really cool. I'm not going to talk too much about clickers, but as you can see in the GIF up there, they're hiding their answer. So it's private and only I know. So really there's no reason to lie because the peers won't see. So after you have that established, they're pretty much all honest about that. So, but what's important about that, they know the expectation as far as what they're working towards, and they're self-assessing them, because honestly, I don't think I have enough time to assess every skill of every student. I mean, otherwise I wouldn't get anything done. I would get to talk to students about other things. I would be so worried about focusing on assessment all the time. So I think it's important to empower them and give them the opportunity to self-assess. This is just one example of how I do it with a grade level outcome. But let's say it's the first day of second grade jump rope. I wouldn't have this up. I might say this is what we're working towards, but I might not have them self-assess this because they might not be ready for this. Let's say they're brand new to jump rope. I'm not going to automatically think that they're going to, in 40 minutes, be able to master this. This might be at the end of the unit, but I'll still have the grade level outcome up there so they know what the eventual goal is. But if I put that up there after the first day, they would be almost frustrated or really sad because they're not quite there yet. So I have to intentionally plan on this, having other assessments or other things they can answer that are more appropriate to what they already can do. This would actually bring their confidence down and they might want to give up. So knowing when to give assessments as well, I think is important. This is another example. This is from Ross Chakran, a really good one about, what are you worrying about as a student? Do you care about, how you are relative to winning the game or relative to other people? Or do you just care about getting better? Okay, so this is kind of a social emotional one or working with others type of a question, but it's really important to establish that climate to where you teach students that it's important to get better and help others get better versus comparing yourself or just worrying about the results. We talked about worrying about the process earlier. I think that's really important to embed, to share with students early and often. That way they're more likely to improve, because if they're always comparing themselves to others, first of all, comparison, the thief of joy. You're never going to be happy if you're always constantly comparing. yourself to others. So just worry about your goals. And this can be used in any unit, right? This can be used in basketball, soccer, whatever. So that's why I picked it to show. And you can use these slides later. Here's a lot of different Flickr questions if you want to use them. But yeah, so those are all things that I kind of intentionally planned for to help the class run smoother. All right. We talked about how it really helps deepen their understanding as far as asking questions and having reflections. The depth of knowledge questions are really important and things that I plan for ahead of time. So things like using the word like how and why are really, really effective in getting them to understand a little bit more. When you look at the DOK questions, you want to try to have as many 3s and 4s if you can, or as you can. I like to do, if you look at the right side there, it says, can you predict the outcome of? So I like to say, okay, can you predict what will happen if you do the pacer, but you run as fast as you can for the first level? Talk to a neighbor, go. And they'll almost always say, well, we think we're going to get too tired because we wasted energy. That's a level 3 question because they're taking what they know about pacing and they're predicting, guessing what might happen if they use a poor strategy. So now they're having a strategy which is directly connected to improving their goal, right? They have to have a good strategy. That's even a standard, the strategies and coming up with ways to improve your chances of doing well. So I like to say, can you predict a lot of times? But like I said, how and why, if you're constantly asking what is or what are, then they're going to have 1 or 2 word answers, but they're going to know a definition maybe, but they won't know how to connect it to their real life, and they won't have that deeper level. Let's say you have an extra minute, you have this prepared, you have this ready, that you can ask those high level questions to get the most out of your students. So I think it's just something that takes a little bit of time up front, but will definitely make the difference as far as what students remember, and not remember for one day, remember long term, because remember, they're explaining why. They're also usually connecting it to their life or a bigger picture, I guess. Last thing, we always want to make it relevant to them. If we're doing jump rope and they don't particularly like jump rope, you can say things like, okay, how does jump rope help you with what you love to do? Okay, so let's say they love to play basketball. And they might, knowing that jump rope helps their heart, they might say something like, okay, doing my best on jump rope might actually help me become a better basketball player because now I have a little bit more endurance, I can last longer, I can get away from those defenders. So always connect what you're learning, especially when they don't necessarily love it, to what they might like, so they can see it as relevant. For yoga, for example, sometimes we know boys, some boys might not like yoga. I show a video, being from Arizona, of Larry Fitzgerald, the football player, because they all love football and the Cardinals, of doing yoga and explaining why. And all of a sudden, everyone's engaged because I planned on incorporating their interest of football and explaining, have Larry Fitzgerald himself explain. Sometimes they don't want to listen to me, right? They can listen to one of their heroes, Larry Fitzgerald, and if he says yoga is important, they're going to be on task. So as much as you can ahead of time, relate to whatever you're doing to their life. I think it's critical.
All right, so the use of open-ended questions can reveal how students are critically thinking. I try to use open-ended questions as much as possible. It could be as a group or as an individual, but we try to use open-ended questions just to reveal what the students are thinking. I think the best part of an open-ended question is that there's no right or wrong answer. It's just a question that allows students to dig deeper into their thinking of what the topic or whatever the learning target may be for that day. So when we're working together on a cooperative activity, I could ask them before we start, what would it look like to work together as a group? So there's no right or wrong answer to that, but now they're extending their thinking of what would a group look like when they're doing an activity. So when you ask these open-ended questions throughout the lesson, make sure you always finish with reflection at the end of why you were asking those and a question that has that right or wrong answer of that follows up with those open-ended questions. I do it as a community or as a classroom all together because I think asking that question, then students revealing their answers allows that sense of community and allows students to feel like I respect them as individuals and their thinking and what their answers could be. But I also like to show that genuine curiosity. If they ask a question, if they give me an answer, I might ask a question off that answer just to get more explanation or more of the student just engaging in that question that I asked. So it's so kind of like what Kyle was talking about. It's the what, why, and how. Just think of how you want it to directly relate to the topic or the lesson that you're teaching, and how can you gain more from students' understanding of what they understand at the time that you're teaching that skill or that activity or the social emotional skill, whatever it may be. I just love the engagement that comes out of open-ended questions. So.
And Jaryd, I like when you look at that picture, the students are looking at each other. They're obviously, the girl on the left, I think, is doing a great job of attentively listening, and that's something
Yes.
you can you plan for, but also teach and have them practice a lot. That doesn't just take 1 or 2 times. That takes a lot of practice of modeling for you. Let's say you think it's really important, that I do, to pick someone up when they fall. Have them practice that. Show them
Yeah.
what that looks like. Have them practice it. So I think that's really good. That picture shows that you've obviously shown how important it is to listen to each other attentively and taking turns, and that's something that you can plan for as well.
Yeah, and things like picking up a partner or complimenting each other or helping someone with the skill all become modeled and also could become open-ended questions. What does it look like when somebody falls? How can we help them? So remember, not a right or wrong answer, just a question that extends student thinking. So I think one of the most powerful tools we have as teachers is the language that we share with our students. We do it through our teaching, through questioning, through reflection, through just general conversations. Our language that we use with students is what's going to help them become the best students they can possibly be. That's our greatest tool that we have. So the 2 languages I want to talk about is reminding and reinforcing. And when you think of reinforcing language, you're reinforcing the skill that they're showing or the social emotional behavior that they're displaying. When we have modeled how to line up and they get right there, quickly line up, even though I don't have that besides the point. But if you having students line up, you're struggling, you model it, and then they do it right away, don't just brush over that. I saw a lot of you do a great job of quickly and quietly getting in line. Pat yourself on the back, give yourself a woo woo, whatever you need to do to pump them up, but really embrace that. If you just continue to wash over all the stuff that they're doing that needs to be reinforced, they're not really learning, because that reflection, the feedback that you're giving them allows our students to be greater learners. So I have a student in 3rd grade that really struggling with stepping with the opposite foot when overhand throwing. She's continuing to practice and practice, and as soon as she did it, I came over to her and said, I noticed that you did a great job of stepping with your opposite foot. I can tell you've been working really hard throughout the day doing that to help you learn it today by the end of class. And although it's just a little not even a compliment, and just reinforcing that you noticed that and she's doing the correct thing, allows her to know, I need to start stepping with the opposite foot. Mr. Prince is noticing me. So that just reinforces that behavior. Hopefully it continues happening again, but reinforcing language reinforces what you want to continue to see. So
and that's something that obviously you have planned out, and so when you know you're going to see that for whatever student, you know that that's what you're going to say, and you know it's
Absolutely.
effective because you know that student well, and you know they are going to appreciate that. But also, what Jaryd did that he didn't mention really was how he highlighted all these successful attempts, and I call it selectively ignoring the ones that because if you're always trying to correct every single second of every single part of the skill, that's what they're going to remember. Oh, Mr. Prince was yelling at me, blah 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 blah,
Yep.
trying to fix it. Let them kind of have a model on the screen, a GIF. You can point at the GIF maybe, and then they can, I don't want to say teach themselves, but kind of using the model, and all of a sudden now they're in charge, but now you notice them doing it correctly, and now that's what you're shedding light to or bringing light to, and that's what they remember, and now they're going to want to do more things in PE because you talked about the good things, which is what I call connecting physical education with happiness.
Yeah, and sometimes students just have to feel out the learning, right? They have to notice the screen and notice each other doing the same skill to really understand what it would look like. If they just try to practice it without having previous knowledge, they might struggle at first. So constantly, like you said, constantly telling them what they're doing wrong just reinforces what they're doing wrong. You want to reinforce the right behavior, the right skill.
Mm-hmm.
So going with reinforcing language, I have what's called the super student board that I got from Daniel Hill from Kentucky, where like, as far as social emotional skills, if I see a student do something that might result in helping another student, or complimenting another student, I stop the class and I try not to pick out students too much, but like, I really want the student to feel valued. So I say, I heard Damien say that Carla was doing a great job today. Damien, thank you for being so respectful to your classmate. And I'll have Damien go over and sign the super student board, not to take away from him learning, but to reinforce that I love hearing him say those nice things to his classmates. And because he was able to sign the super student board, he'll eventually do it again, because he knows that those positive comments, those positive actions result in positive things. So
yeah, and those are things we can plan for. And let's say you have a different philosophy than Jaryd and I, and you think something else is really important, and when that happens, be prepared to stop and in front of the whole class praise that, to where students know that that's what's expected and what's important to you, because 90% of students want to please, right? So show them that, because sometimes if you don't explain what you're looking for, they don't really know that. You got to be very explicit with what you want to see, and when you see it, it's pretty powerful when you stop the class, explain, and how proud of you. I always give the example of when someone stops when they get tagged right before the safe zone, when they easily could have pretended like they got to the safe zone. And then I stopped the class. Did you notice Grace? She was a foot away, and she when she got tagged, she sat down, and because I was very honest, because that's directly related to my philosophy, being honest, and how important that is to my class. And so I think just being very explicit to the students of what you expect, and when you see it, stop, praise.
I think both of us have a general idea of every student can do that, can be honest, can be respectful. Not every student can throw really far or run really fast. So doing things that stopping and complimenting and reinforcing the behaviors that everybody can do makes it more valuable.
Yeah,
I'm going to quickly touch on reminding language.
Yeah, go ahead.
Reminding language is just like, it kind of says what it is, right? So when we are about to do a skill or a game, I tend to go over Ben Lander's good sportsmanship code. So who can tell me how we use a good sportsmanship code during this activity? Or remember our rule of take care of others when doing this tagging activity. So just reminding students, or all students, of what you expect before you start can help them reinforce the behaviors that you want. You can also use reminding language. Well, sorry, you don't want to use reminding language if they don't know what you expect. Students cannot do it. They don't know what you expect. So make sure you tell them beforehand what you expect, so you can remind them during the activity what they should be doing.
This is from Mike Ginicola. Thanks, Mike Ginicola.
Yep.
We talked about Ben
Thanks, Mike.
Landers and also Dan Hill. So thanks everyone for coming into our PE classes.
So when my students enter the classroom, I always have a lot of energy. They know that. They hopefully love that. I don't know. But
Yeah.
I'm always yelling hi or how's everybody doing as soon as they come in, and they know to come right to the smart board and look on the screen to see what they're supposed to be doing as soon as they come in. So after already learning how to dribble, my fifth graders would come in, they would see this on the screen, they would find their own space, they would find their own ball and get started right away. When they're finished, they would sit on the number so we can get back into our message. But what it does is it allows students to have that confidence to come in and do their job right away. And it still instills that sense of responsibility, of independence that all students desire. It gives them visuals on the screen of I could say right-handed, left-handed crossover, but if we only did crossover one time, they might not understand what that is. So that gives them that sense of, I now know what to do because I see it, right? So when I first started teaching, I would just have it up on the whiteboard. Students would come up to me and ask me, what are we supposed to be doing? So then I'd be spending time telling them what to do rather than just showing them. So now I have the projector, it on the screen, they now see it, they can do it. What this does for me as a teacher is allows me to check in with students, to come up to students and see how they're doing, to build on those relationships that we know we don't have a lot of time to do so. So I see my students every 3 days. I don't get a lot of times to build on relationships. So doing this, allowing this independence for the first 5 minutes, allows myself to check in with students, see how they're doing, catch up with whatever basketball game they had over the weekend or whatever soccer game or whatever they're doing, and just build on those relationships. And I love to be able to do that. And if I see a student struggling, I'll let them struggle for a little bit, but then I'll help them out if they need it. And it just gives them that sense of independence, responsibility that all students desire, and gives me that flexibility in whether it's to set up or build relationships.
Also, you're maximizing time because they know the routine, so there's no wasted time. They get to their spot right away. There's no wasted time there. Also, to go even further, you can probably have, occasionally if you have time or plan for it, I guess, have students in the GIF so they can kind of show the class that.
Yes. Yep.
Or have students that are experienced in basketball go around and helping others while you do the same, but maybe checking with students more. So using students as a leadership role, I think, and I know you do that, but those are things that you can intentionally plan for because you know so-and-so is experienced in basketball. You see them at recess, you talk to them about basketball, you can kind of have them kind of lead, and that also shows them some empathy too, right? That
Yeah.
leader can kind of, because everyone has their thing, but everyone has something they might struggle with, and they all, it's important to show that we care about you and we're going to help you. And then maybe you'll help me later if I struggle at yoga. I remember you helped me in basketball, or I helped you in basketball, and you can help me in yoga later. So it's kind of a win-win there.
And like you're saying, Kyle, mine says sit on your number when you're done. Yours, it's your classroom. You got to remember that. Like what I'm doing is going to be the same for everyone. Yours could be go help somebody else with their right-handed dribbles, help them with the cues so they understand. So like that leadership for students is also another sense of the confidence and the trust that you give them. So that would be great.
I think to summarize too, and this is all intentionally planned for at the beginning or ahead of time. So everything runs smoother because you have planned for it and you've thought about all these details, such detail-oriented planning.
So all this happens because of what I learned as interactive modeling. Students don't learn to come to the screen and see what they're supposed to do without it having that routine being interactively modeled. At the beginning of the year, when students come in, they just sit down right away or do an activity right away that might get them moving around a little bit. whatever it may be for you. But after that, you need to establish those routines, and to do that, use interactive modeling. So like we could tell them what to do all day long, right? But showing them how to do it without saying a word allows them to notice what you're doing. You could tell them, and obviously they might hear you, they might not. But when you show them a skill, when you show them a routine, when you show them a procedure, it allows them to notice. So what I do is I will, at the beginning of the year, I'll do it more in depth, but I'll say, all right, everyone, this is what we're doing. And then I show them. When I come back to them, I'll take a couple people to tell me what they noticed. After they notice me doing it, I'll have another student that's already been prepped, like Kyle said earlier, of what we're supposed to be doing. So they already know, they'll show them. Again, we'll talk about what they noticed them doing. And then it's time for all the class to do it. All the class to model what the skill is. After they're all done, what am I doing? I'm using that reinforcing language. I notice all of you did a great job of helping each other up when someone fell during the activity. That sticks in their mind. That gives them that sense that this procedure, this routine is important. It matters. So don't just continue to tell them that. So many times in my beginning of my career, I just told students what to do. All right, we're gonna go over, you're gonna grab a basketball, you're gonna come back, you're gonna start dribbling with your right hand. I would assume you could guess what happened. Everyone had to sit back down. I had to re-explain what was gonna happen, and we had to try again. Now, students are just doing it. There's no wasted time. It takes not even 5 minutes to do this. And then everybody does it the correct way the first time. So interactive modeling for me has changed the way that everything is done in my classroom.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So for students to learn, reflective thinking has to happen. Reflection is learning. So instead of just that quote at the bottom, John Dewey, we do not learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on that experience. So when we reflect together, we strengthen the bond we have as for the learning and each other. At the end of class, I always allow 5 minutes. This 5 minutes is used to share their experiences with the learning content that we might have. So it might be a walk and talk, it might be a turn and talk, it might be just students sharing, but they notice when someone is talking, all our eyes are on that person that's building their interpersonal skills, their interpersonal skills. We try to affirm each other and motivate each other by giving a big gator clap or giving 2 power claps for whatever they share, so they feel that affirmation from not only me but from each other. And then we finish with some sort of celebration. My students love a roller coaster cheer. We've done multiple cheers. We've done the picture frame cheer. Open Phys Ed has a lot of these on their website. If you search for them, you'll find them. I highly suggest ending with these because the culture in my classroom has completely changed with reflection. We could go all day, every day, doing all the games we can for as long as we can, and then just ending and lining up and going, and they just forget about everything that they did learn. But taking the what, why, and how, asking those open-ended DOK questions throughout the class, and then reflecting at the end of it allows that learning to be instilled in each and every child and each and every student, so they hold on to that knowledge, so when they come back they aren't just learning again the same lesson that they did the previous day. So
Yeah, so they're celebrating success, so they're bringing joy and happiness to or connecting that to physical education. They're going to be more likely to come back happy. They're going to be excited to come back to PE, and they're going to remember that. They might even, if they do a fun cheer like that, I know if I did that back in the day, I'd probably go home and tell my friends and family, and then all of a sudden they'd be like, the family would be like, oh, so tell us more about PE, and then all of a sudden you have this home connection to where parents might even be able to reinforce these concepts at home, and then you're almost doubling your learning because they're learning in multiple settings.
This has actually changed the way I've let students go as well. I've learned this from you, Kyle. Is we finish in the circle, and then each student gets a chance, or whoever was showing great eye contact, whoever did a great job throughout the classroom, I would pick as this head of the snake. I learned this from you, and they would just lead the line. It's made everything way smoother. So again, it's intentional, but it's the way we might do it doesn't have to be the way you do it. What works for you, but make sure you're thinking about how your lesson will look each and every day.
Yeah, that's awesome. Really quick, if you don't know the snake, basically they're in the circle. You all finish in the circle, and then you pick one person to lead the snake, and they basically do follow the leader back to the class. So they don't know where the start is. You pick the person that's meeting the expectations or exceeding them, and then they all follow along. So there's no running to the line because they don't know where the front of the line is. You do. So I think that's a good way to finish.
I'm gonna go over this real quick because we're running out of time here, but I like to give students a chance to get excited about their learning and make that personal connection. So I always share at the beginning of the year what students are going to learn throughout the year. So they'll see the entire curriculum, whatever unit we're going to do, and they'll be able to make that personal connection to it. So it could be academic, it could be social, it could be behavioral. It has to be realistic, it has to be a SMART goal. So I allow students to share their hopes with me of what they hope to accomplish this year. And we also revisit it throughout the year. So I keep each classroom in a different Ziploc bag. And at Thanksgiving break, winter break, spring break, we always go back to these and allow them to change or revise these goals so they can always keep pushing towards a goal that they want to accomplish, and it gives them that sense of ownership over their learning, so they are excited about what they can do as a student. And I support them throughout the way, affirming, oh, your goal was to dribble a basketball with each hand, and now you're doing that. You've worked really hard to get to there.
Yeah, that's awesome. Once again, remembering the good things, celebrating the good things. The one on the left there is mine, where I just ask them what they are wanting to learn more about, and if I can incorporate their interest in the curriculum, I can, but it gives them that voice choice, or at least a chance to be heard. And to finish up here, these are just some, there's some blogs and podcasts and things that are related to intentional planning, or how to set up your classroom, and if you need more ideas. There's the QR code, and there's the a link if you want to use the slides and access those blogs and podcasts. That'd be great. But I thank Jaryd for doing this with me, and I had a great time.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle.
Let us know. We're both happy to answer any questions. Shoot us a message on Twitter, and we'll be happy to help out. So thanks for coming, and have a good night.
See you, everyone.